Her gloves were taken away in trunks, wrapped in cloth, so that no smell would remain. No seamstress agreed to repair them. The fabric cracked as if it had been soaked in acid, and brownish-green marks remained on the inside. The court physician wrote in his diary, "When the left glove was removed, the skin on the middle and ring fingers remained inside. The queen did not cry out. She only asked how long it was until Mass." This was about Helena de Valois, Queen of France, the last wife of Charles IX, a woman who had been the subject of whispers throughout the court since the beginning of September, but whose name no one dared to utter aloud. Her body had begun to decay while she was still alive, and even her confessors no longer tried to hide it. She did not go hunting, did not receive ambassadors, did not touch the king, but every week, at a precisely appointed time, she was carried to the altar, where she sat with a frozen face, clutching a handkerchief, and praying that the smell would not escape. The decomposition began with her fingers. At the time, people said it was caused by a crack from a falcon's bite. The wound did not heal, and after a week, dark, sticky pus appeared under her fingernail. Servants claimed that it gave off a sweet smell, like a rotten date. And once, when her glove was removed too abruptly, her fingernail came off with the flesh, and the skin began to peel away in strips. They treated it with vinegar and ash ointments, applied leeches, and smeared it with church balm. But the tissue rotted faster than they could remove the scab. Her fingers turned black. After a month, she could only move them with the help of her other hand, and the servants left one after another. One of the maids, Marie de la Roche, was later questioned by a priest and recorded in her testimony, "It smelled like swamp fish fed to dogs. Even when the doors were closed and tied with wet cloth, the stench seeped through the cracks." One of the porters fainted. The court was in turmoil. The king spent more and more evenings with his favorite, Mademoiselle de Saint-Clair, while the court physicians argued about whether the queen should continue to appear in public. The old Duke of Brittany, an ally of the Guise family, who had his sights set on the regency in the event of Helena's death, was particularly concerned. He made no secret of his irritation. "If her body falls apart right in the cathedral, it will be a sign. The people will take it as punishment for all our blood." 3 doctors, including Cardinal Bourbon's personal physician, tried to localize the decay with poultices, punctures, and lead plate bandages. However, against the backdrop of the dying limbs, other symptoms began to appear. Dark mucus flowed from her nose. Her temperature remained high for 3 days in a row. And one evening, the queen lost consciousness during morning liturgy. As she fell, one of the servants caught her by the hand, and her hand remained in his palm. By morning, she was transferred to a south-facing bedroom with windows overlooking a secluded garden. There, her bed was changed, the heavy curtains were unfastened, and wine barrels filled with vinegar and incense were placed in the corners of the room. All this was recorded by the chamberlain, the Marquis de Pontarel, who would later be accused of concealing the plague at court. He also noted in his report, "The toenails have fallen off, ulcers appeared on the inner thighs, oozing pus. At night, she had a fever. She cried out twice in her sleep, calling for her mother and father. Once, she asked to rewrite her will." All this was happening against the backdrop of a slow political breakdown, and after the death of the Dauphin Arnaud, the court was rife with rumors. Protestant aristocrats, who had recently been brought to court for the sake of peace, were once again leaving for their estates. Rumors spread throughout Paris that the queen had been poisoned, and that her illness was unnatural. Her confessor, Father Clément, was summoned to her 3 times in 4 days. After his last visit, he renounced the court and left for a monastery near Orléans. In a letter to the Archbishop of Tours, he wrote, "I saw a corpse that was still breathing. God does not dwell in her flesh." The most disturbing thing happened at the next Mass. The queen, wrapped in furs, was carried out on a stretcher and seated on a bench. She did not move. Her eyes were closed. When the choir sang Agnus Dei, her ungloved hands slowly fell to her knees, and then her finger fell off, right onto the white altar cloth. 3 priests, 1 courtier, and about 10 court ladies saw it. No one screamed, only a servant dropped the censer, and it rolled across the floor with a dull clang. After that, she was never taken out again. She remained in the south bedroom, where the windows were covered with 3 layers of fabric, and the entrance was guarded by guards. Doctors suggested cutting off the dead parts of her body, but due to lack of strength and high fever, Elena did not regain consciousness for more than a few minutes at a time. Her voice sounded like a wheeze. According to the maid, her ear had turned black and fell off when the bandage was changed. By the end of the 3rd week, a wet wheezing sound could be heard almost constantly from the chambers. Straw and vinegar-soaked rags were placed under the bed, but they had to be changed 5 times a day. The doctors no longer pretended. It was decay while she was still alive. One of them, at the cardinal's instigation, attempted to perform an exorcism, reading a spell over the body and placing a consecrated dagger on her chest. In the morning, a purulent abscess opened on the queen's chest. At night, the chambers were quiet, quieter than they should have been when a body that was once considered a vessel of God's will was dying. The servants no longer prayed aloud. They whispered. Sometimes they even crossed themselves in the shadows, but not openly. They feared accusations of heresy. Those who remained did so not out of loyalty, but on the orders of the chancellor. They were paid from the treasury reserves, with a note, for special service at the palace. No one mentioned the queen's name. Even in reports, they wrote she or the body. The windows had not been opened for 2 weeks. The room was fogged up from the inside. The upholstery on the walls had blackened at the seams, and sticky mold had appeared on the wood of the bed. According to the junior laundress, when she was told to change the sheets, they crunched with dried liquid. Urine and pus soaked into the pillows and dripped down the mattress to the floor, where it spread into sticky stains. The floors were doused with wine, then vinegar, then rubbed with chalk, but the smell would not go away. The queen herself did not move. After fainting at mass, she did not utter a single complete sentence. Her mouth was dry, her lips were cracked, and her tongue was so swollen that, according to the physician Darbouze, it protruded through her teeth and prevented her from breathing. She was fed with a spoon, first with poppy seed broth, then with diluted wine with cloves. Sometimes she vomited. Once she vomited a black clot in which 2 teeth were found. This was recorded in the care report dated October 4th. Black spots continued to appear on her body, not a rash or ulcers, but dark bruises, as if her skin were cracking from the inside. They tried to pierce them, smear them with ash and honey paste, but the pus flowed back, acrid, with the smell of rotten milk. Her right thigh was particularly affected. When the bandage was removed, the fabric came off in pieces. From there, according to the maids, white maggots crawled out like from carrion. One of the servants screamed and dropped the basin. He was told to be quiet. He was never seen again. On the 9th day after the liturgy, the queen opened her eyes and cried. Without a sound, a cloudy liquid flowed from her eyes. When the doctor approached her, she tried to say a word, perhaps her name, but only a whistle came out of her mouth. At the same time, she tried to turn her head, and part of her earlobe fell off. A servant picked it up and put it in a handkerchief. That same evening, King Charles Nepomuk secretly arrived at the south wing. He was accompanied by only 3 people, his valet, the Archbishop of Reims, and a young woman in green, Mademoiselle de Saint-Clair. The king did not enter the bedroom. He stood behind the door, holding onto the archway, as if afraid to enter. For several minutes, he simply watched as the bandages were changed. Then he turned and left without saying a word. After that, security was tightened. The order was short. No visitors. No one. Cardinal Guise ordered the exorcism to be performed. Holy water and a censer were brought into the room. Candles were lit, and prayers began. The queen stirred. Her fingers, almost transparent, with the skin torn off, tried to grab the cross, but it slipped out of her hands, and with it, the phalanx of her little finger fell off. The novice noticed this. He did not cry out, but after the ceremony, he left the abbey and never returned to court. The political crisis worsened. The papal nuncio refused to give communion to the queen in her condition. He declared that the devil had already entered the flesh, and went to a monastery, citing ill health. Only an old monk from Rouen remained with the queen, reading psalms to her every day. He did not speak to her, but looked into her eyes when they opened. In one of his notes, he wrote, "There is fear there, not pain, only horror of what will come next." Meanwhile, the tissue continued to separate from the body. A wound opened on the lower back, which doctors tried to cover with animal skin. It did not take. Pus mixed with blood and dirt oozed from the wound, and one day a soft piece of tissue fell out, probably part of a muscle. After that, neither the cardinals nor even the ladies-in-waiting appeared in the room. Only the silent servants and the senior maid remained, who had been forced to sign a vow of silence. At the same time, a struggle for the regency began in the courtyard. The Duke of Anjou, learning of the queen's almost dead body, began collecting signatures for a manifesto stating that, in the event of the death of the body without a lawful burial, the throne may be cursed. In response, the Chancellor issued a decree stating that the queen was alive, albeit in suffering, and entitled to respect and protection. This gave rise to rumors that the body had long been dead, and that empty bandages were guarding the chambers. Against this backdrop, the entire royal court began to leave the Louvre. Ambassadors left, cardinals went to abbeys, and court ladies returned to their provinces. France lay low, the church was silent, the weather deteriorated. One night, it began to rain, pounding on the windows of the bedroom, where, according to all records, the queen had not moved for 3 days. Only when liquid began to seep out from under the door did the guards decide to enter. What they saw was later described in a report as resembling a female body, but without signs of life, with detached parts and traces of decay. By this point, her right leg had already separated from her hip. Her chest was exposed, probably under her own weight. One eye was burst, the other was open. The queen's body was carried out, accompanied not by prayers, but by silence. No priest blessed the transfer or sprinkled the remains with holy water. By order of the Chancellor, the windows on the entire south wing were closed and the staircases were blocked. The procession, if that word can be used, consisted of 4 silent servants and 1 senior bodyguard. The body was carried on an oiled canvas, rolled up so that the juices would not drip onto the floor. The sheets in which she lay could not be washed. They had been burned in the courtyard the day before. According to the report of the royal archivist, the body was unidentifiable without seals. The skin had slipped off her face. Her eyelids had slid down as if they had been rubbed off. Her hair remained on the pillow. When they tried to lift her, her left shoulder detached. Later, this was attributed to post-mortem relaxation of the ligaments. The smell was so strong that the bodyguard, who had served at the court for more than 20 years, fainted at the entrance to the chapel. The first attempts to embalm the body failed. By the time of the autopsy, the internal organs had almost turned into a mushy mass. The liver fell apart at the touch of a knife, as Dr. Darbouze noted. The stomach was completely empty. The lungs were filled with black foam, probably from internal decomposition. All this against the backdrop of the heart, which, according to one witness, was like boiled, whitish, with cracks around the edges. The body was placed in a lead coffin without ceremony. The funeral service was held in a closed circle, 3 priests, 2 cardinals, and security guards. None of them approached the coffin. The lid was nailed shut before the psalms were finished. The only thing that was heard aloud was a whispered name, Marguerite. No one called her that anymore. That same evening, unrest began. A crowd gathered at the gates of the Louvre, demanding proof that the queen was dead and not hidden. Notes were distributed in the square. She was burned to hide the signs of the devil's disease. A note was preserved in the manuscript of a priest from Avignon. A woman whose fingers fall off during Mass cannot be sanctified by God. This fueled the hysteria. Panic broke out at court. The Duke of Anjou demanded that the will be opened, but it was not found. The Chancellor declared that it had not yet been drawn up and requested a postponement. At the same time, documents began to disappear. Within a week, 6 volumes of correspondence disappeared from the archives, including the doctor's reports, letters to the Pope, and confessions. The senior scribe was suspected, but there was no evidence. He was hanged without trial. While the body lay in the chapel, rumors spread throughout Paris. The coffin is moving. Testimonies differed. Some claimed to have heard knocking. Others said they saw the guards open the lid twice. One of the servants confessed under torture that he saw a worm as long as a finger crawling out of a crack. This was recorded in the interrogation report, but was later deleted. The ritual burning of the bedding took place on the morning of the 4th day after his death. All the fabrics, including curtains, pillows, and even part of the upholstery, were thrown onto the bonfire. Witnesses claimed that the smoke was dark and had a pungent odor. One of the cardinals who watched from the balcony later wrote, "If hell has a smell, this is it." After the burning, disinfection began in the palace. The rooms were fumigated, flooded with vinegar, and the walls were sealed. At the same time, new rumors began to spread that the disease that had struck the queen was contagious. 3 maids who had been caring for her died within a week. One doctor fell into a fever. The monastery that received the body declared a quarantine. Letters describing the symptoms spread throughout the kingdom: rash, pus, convulsions, hair loss. But no one called it the plague. It was a curse of the body. The church remained silent. The Pope did not comment. Ambassadors wrote home about the horrific finale and possible change in the dynasty. A struggle broke out within the council. Supporters of the Duke of Burgundy accused the Chancellor of concealing the fact of death, of replacing the will, and falsifying the last will and testament. Those who defended the Queen's honor demanded that those who doubted the sanctity of suffering be excommunicated. On the 7th day, the Queen's body was taken from the Louvre, secretly in the evening, in a closed carriage surrounded by soldiers. The place of burial was not announced. It was said that she was buried in an unmarked tomb, so as not to disturb the souls of the living. After the funeral, which was not announced publicly, the country was left without a queen and without a clear plan of succession. The king, although alive, did not leave his chambers. According to his valet, he muttered prayers for the body that was rotting while the devil licked his soul. The court medical journal recorded, "The monarch is unconscious, refuses food, and does not get out of bed. His saliva became cloudy, his teeth were coated, and his breathing was heavy and putrid. The doctor prescribed opium, then daily bloodletting, but he himself was dismissed after only 2 days. Security was tightened at the palace. Icons and holy relics appeared on the walls, as if this could stop the spread of rumors, but fear was already everywhere. In Paris, people whispered that the queen's death was the beginning of the end of the dynasty, that the decay of her flesh was a sign of a curse on the entire court. A surgeon who secretly examined the remains wrote, "The body rotted from the inside before life faded away. This is not a disease, this is punishment." The maid who at last washed the queen's hands disappeared. Her bed remained untouched. Servants refused to enter the chambers, which still smelled of vinegar, herbs, and something thick, reminiscent of meat brine. The floors were scrubbed, the walls repainted, and the carpets burned. But the smell did not go away. A struggle began within the inner circle. One of the bishops claimed that the body should not be recognized as holy and demanded an investigation, suspecting heretical tampering. Duke Naversky proposed convening a council of nobles to distribute titles in advance, in case of the king's death. This was perceived as treason. He was arrested 2 days later on charges of interfering in church affairs. Fearing an uprising, the chancellor sent messengers with the news that the queen had died of blood poisoning due to a festering abscess on her leg. He ordered this to be read in all parishes, but the text did not correspond to the truth. The pathologist's report, copied by a servant, read, "The fingers began to rot before the wound appeared. Both hands rotted away. The left hand fell off before the end of Mass." While the king was dying, his nephew, the Duke of Lorraine, was gathering an army. He had already bribed supporters in Saintes and Bordeaux, promising reform and an end to the disintegration. The church did not intervene. The priests remained silent. The cardinals went into hiding. One monk who fled the Louvre wrote, "Darkness in the chambers. There is no light. Even the candles are going out." This letter soon found its way into the hands of the Bishop of Rouen and was recognized as a miraculous sign of the end of an era. When the king died 10 days later, his body was not put on display. He was not washed, shaved, or dressed. It was said that his chest was covered with sores from which worms were crawling. His ears were blackened, his tongue was swollen, and his stomach was so distended that his clothes could not cover it. Servants wrapped him in canvas and lid as if he were an ungodly man. No priest dared to come closer than 5 steps. The funeral took place at night. There was no singing, no bells, no crying. After the monarch's death, what everyone feared began. The family split. Some supported the Duke of Brittany, others the king's brother's widow, and still others the Bishop of Tours, who promised to restore light and holiness. There were 7 pretenders to the throne. The country was divided. Rebellions broke out in various places. One lord closed his parish and declared that the queen's death was punishment for the corruption of the priests. In Normandy, a monastery where a piece of her bedspread was kept was burned down. People believed that the fabric was contagious. In Tours, according to rumors, a peasant found a finger, supposedly preserved from her body, and tried to use it as a talisman. He was publicly executed. An era of anarchy began throughout France. A letter from the Saxon ambassador stated, "France stinks, not only with bodies, but also with souls." A chronicler from Burgundy would later write, "First, the woman rotted, then the bed, then the walls, then the country." The story of Margaret, the queen, whose fingers fell off during Mass, ended not in death, but in fear. Her death did not cause mourning, it caused decay, political, ecclesiastical, mortal. For a decade, no one dared to restore her name. Only in the chronicles of the monk Thibaut of Poitiers is there one sentence: "Those who fear the smell of the body should fear their own souls."